And it doesn't matter if Bill Clinton is in office or George W. Bush. They're just figureheads, puppets, marionettes dancing on a string. And you follow those strings back to the dirty little corner, and there's a big fat spider sitting there. And yes, my friends, there really is an Illuminati. There really are 13 families. They own the big banks that print the money, and they have stated publicly that they plan to get all of us, that's 95 to 80% of us, out of the way to engineer a servant class and to totally take control of the evolutionary development of the human species. Now that's heavy stuff. Sounds like a science fiction movie 30, 40 years ago. We're in 2003. And whether I'm reading some CNN news story or Silicon Weekly or Bill Joy in Wired, they're bragging about how the elite is going to be the only group, the real elite. I don't mean the guy down the road that owns $1 million house. I mean the real elite, the folks that own the banks that print the money. That's when you're wealthy. That's when you're powerful. That's when you're rich. That they are the only people that are going to have access to all of this undreamed technology that's been developed. So we're not just fighting old-fashioned tyranny here of the Babylonians or the Romans or Hitler or Stalin or Mao. We're fighting a push by a scientifically crafted dictatorship that is sworn to dehumanize you and your family.
The country is getting poorer. There is no doubt in my mind. A lot of people are going to get poorer. They're going to get poorer because the country is poorer. And they have exhausted now the tools that they have used traditionally since we've had our Federal Reserve, especially in the last 30 or 40 years. The tools that they have used to get us out of recessions have always been fiscal stimulation. Government spend money, run up the deficit, print more money. Well, this time around, they've been doing that, at excessive rates. Even early on, even before the recession hit, they were doing it. So what are they going to do? In the old days, if the recession was, if they wanted to end the recession, interest rates were brought up high to dampen the economy, and interest rates would be high. Well, now, at the bottom of the recession, interest rates are at 0, 1%. Real interest rates are very, very low. So how can they lower them? How can we spend more money? The national debt is going up right now over $700 billion per year. And about 6 or 8 months ago, I thought I was making a very, very rash prediction and said, before too long, in the next several years, we're going to have the national debt, which includes the money you borrow from Social Security. The national debt is going to go up over $1 trillion in 1 year. And I think that's going to be true. But there's going to be a limit to this. Eventually what happens, it runs out of steam, the dollar loses its value, interest rates go up anyway, which they have started to do, inflation comes back, and you have inflation with recession and depression, and the government can't function. But the real threat then is, will the momentum that we have now, will it build? Will it pick up? Will we not have hundreds but thousands of people then recognizing what we have to do? And that is restore limited constitutional government to Washington. And I think what has happened to our country is that over the years, the prosperity, which was a consequence of our liberties, have become the dominant theme of everything that we do, whether it's local or national in politics. So it is the desire to get more and more wealth. And to get more and more wealth, you have to have more and more control of the government because the government controls so much of the wealth. So the concentration and the effort in Washington is 99% on preservation of wealth and what we're going to do, and very little concentration on the issues that we deal with, the preservation of liberty. If we concentrate and do our job and preserve liberty, we will never have to worry about our wealth. Thank you very much. Okay, he asked if there's an international conspiracy to overthrow our government. The answer is yes, but probably not in exactly the terms that you're inferring, at least my understanding. I can't go and say, well, I know the 25 people who meet and have made these plans, and this is what's going to happen. I think there are 25,000 individuals that have used office of hours. And they're in our universities, and they're in our Congresses, and they believe in one world government. And if you believe in one world government, then you're talking about undermining national sovereignty, and you're talking about setting up something that you could very well call dictatorship. And those plans are there, but they're not quite, I don't see them as quite as sinister as a plot. I think it's a philosophic fight. They believe in this. The people I know believe in internationalism, the United Nations, and some of those people who voted against the war didn't vote against the war because of not having a declaration of war. They wanted more support from the United Nations. And that attitude is prevailing because it's been taught so long in our public school system, as well as our universities, and the people of great influence on our major news networks, and most of the positions in government support internationalism that would lead to that type of.
Can you speak to the neocons of your speech you gave about the Trotskyite, Machiavellian view?
Yes. Now the neocon speech, I think, is available here, and it's 20 or 30 pages, so I can't go over the whole thing. But the whole purpose of it was to try to point out the philosophic background to those individuals who control our foreign policy. And a major part of it was a critique of a book written by Michael Ledeen, who's one of the leaders of neoconservatives, and he's at the American Enterprise Institute. And he believes in all this stuff, except he only believes in the United Nations if the United Nations does what he wants it to do. But he's almost a militant nationalist, and he had written a book on Machiavelli, and praised Machiavelli, and really believed you should use these tools, which are rather ruthless. So I took his quotes and answered many of his quotes, and I quoted him literally in order to try to keep it, from getting too emotional. And the interesting thing about this was he called me. He wrote emails, and he also called my office. He was outraged, by this. He wanted an apology and everything else. But he praised. He high praise of Machiavelli. But the most interesting thing is that book I had read it. I had read it about 2 or 3 years ago. I think it was 1999 when I read it when it came out. And it was handed out to us at a Republican strategy meeting. And I read that, and it really, I went back and looked at it and said, when I was starting to put all these pieces together about who really got control of foreign policy since 2001, and that he was this ringleader in it, then I went back and reread this book, and that's what generally that book was about.
Let me state this important facet of why we can't dig out of the mud, why we can't get out of this at this point right now. Because people are still in their Democrat and Republican camps. And you look at the people, who control the parties, and you look at their actions: open borders, gun control, more regulation, more taxation, arming our enemies, building up China and North Korea. You look at the real actions of the Republicans and the Democrats, they are almost identical. Almost identical. And so you've got the left and the right. I've told the so-called left, the bleeding heart, useful idiot left, you guys should absolutely love George Bush. The government's exploding in size at every level. He's expanding the Department of Education. He's signing on to the UN and UNESCO to take control of our educational processes. He says he'll sign the new assault weapons ban that's come up for reauthorization with a ban of all semi-automatic shotguns. Now that's in there, folks.